Good morning and welcome to the Detroit Regional Chamber's Town Hall Series to celebrate Black leaders. I am Bernard Parker. Today will be the first of many town hall discussions to celebrate Black leaders from Detroit and the region and around the state. Each 30-minute discussion will share leadership insights as well as work underway to achieve racial justice and greater equity in our region. Today, I am joined by two leaders from the state of Michigan's Department of Civil Rights, Executive Director James White and Equity Officer Mr. Alfredo Hernandez. James and Alfredo are here to discuss their important work and how the department can support employees and provide resources to employers. Before we get started, I want to turn it over to my colleague Brad Williams, also of the Chamber, for some instructions regarding today's discussion. Brad?
Bernard, thanks so much. And Director White, Alfredo, thanks so much for being here too. I'm really excited to be a part of this series. This is the first time we have done this series. What I want to make sure is that the people who are participating on the other side of our computer screen have an opportunity to get their questions asked too. And so in the GoToWebinar platform, there is an opportunity to ask questions. I'm going to be keeping track of those. So if you've got a question for either the director or Alfredo or me, feel free and drop those questions in the question box, and we will get to them as we drop them in. And so I know Bernard has some questions. I've got some questions. So Bernard, why don't you start out asking, and we can get down to the nitty gritty. We've got about a half hour with these gentlemen, which I know is not going to be nearly enough time to get everything we want to get to it.
Okay, so gentlemen, again, welcome. Start by telling us a little bit about the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, perhaps when it was established, what is your focus, and how does it support Michiganders?
Okay, I'll start with that one. The commission was started in 1963, was created in the redrafting of the Michigan Constitution. Michigan was the first state in the nation to include civil rights protections in its constitution, which is fantastic. The Michigan Department of Civil Rights, as indicated, was created in 1965, and the department carries out the mission of the Civil Rights Commission. We derive our authority under the Elliott-Larsen Act, which was established in 1976. The Michigan Department of Civil Rights, we investigate a number of things. We investigate complaints on employment, housing, ADA concerns. Our jurisdiction is statewide. The parameters of the jurisdiction is that the complaint itself has to have occurred in the last 180 days, and it must be related to one of those protected classes that I spoke of. And again, those are race, religion, color, national origin, arrest record, genetic information, sex, height, weight, marital status, or disability. And these are referred to as our basis for our investigations. We are a neutral investigatory body. We are not going to take sides in the case. We're just going to investigate the case, remain neutral, and really gather facts from both sides, both the claimant and the respondent. Resolution of the case is truly what the intent is. We look to have the cases remedy. This is an outcome-based type of investigation. What you're looking at when you have these types of circumstances that come up where there's discriminatory practices is if in fact there is pattern and practice of behavior, if in fact there's antiquated policy that may have been written at a time where people were not as socially conscious as they should have been, that still permeates an organization. And so what we try to do with that is after we go in and we look at those cases and we do the investigation is what caused the violation, particularly as it relates to housing, what caused this type of discriminatory practice. So we go in and the hope is and the desire is to remedy the case by way of training, education, and providing resources and tools. Unfortunately, that is not always the case. And when that happens, then we are able to bring a charge against a respondent. And in those cases are remedied and can go before the Civil Rights Commission for resolution.
So, Director, I'd like to ask a question a little bit about the history of the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act, and I think it's kind of awesome. You know, we had two governors in Michigan back to back, one Democrat and one Republican, who were real champions of civil rights between Governor Williams and then Governor Romney. And from a chamber perspective, we've got a real connection to Elliott Larson in that Mel Larson, one of the authors of the bill, is a long-time member of the chamber's political action committee, and someone I was really fortunate to get to know early on in my chamber career. So could you just give us a little bit of history of the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act, and where it came from and how it's been utilized in Michigan?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on quite a bit of it already. The two sponsors that you indicated was Daisy Elliott and Melvin Larson, Republican and Democrat, passed in 1976 by Governor Milliken. And I mean, very innovative at the time, and everyone's protected under the Elliott Larson Act. So it's not like there's a carve out or anyone was left out. Certainly there's some expansion that we want to see with the Elliott Larson Act, which I can get into a little bit later. But I think it was an innovative approach to give the authorities in which it gives, and it's a very progressive act. Two sides of the aisle coming together at that time is something that I hope to see replicated as we go forward. I mean, certainly it's in the times that we're in right now, that's the type of cooperation and positivity that we need.
So very interesting, Mr. White, and particularly as we celebrate Black leaders in this series, it's great to mention that Daisy Elliott was actually an African-American woman to serve in the legislature who helped author, sponsor, push through this bill. Is that correct?
That is correct. I had the opportunity to meet one of her family members at the naming of the Elliott Larson building in Lansing, and just a wonderful person. You've got an African-American female, a white male at that time coming together from different sides of the aisle. Just a remarkable and courageous woman to partner and to come up with such an innovative act.
So, I'm sorry, I got a little lag, and I hope I didn't interrupt anyone because of the internet. But Director White, and maybe Alfredo, you might want to jump in here too. You know, you mentioned, Director White, that everyone kind of falls under the protection of the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act, but we know that there are some people who don't get the protection of it. Can you maybe elaborate on that a little bit?
I can, and I am also getting that lag. Can you repeat the last part of your that just came in?
Yeah, who doesn't fall under the protection of the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act today?
Well, everyone's protected. You know, race, sex, height, familial status, marital status. However, we are looking to continue to support sexual orientation, the change to the act to really define sexual orientation. In 2018, the Civil Rights Commission issued an interpretive statement, which essentially defines a protected class under the Elliott Larson Act as sexual orientation. However, we're looking to support changes to the act that clearly define that. The Supreme Court agrees with the Civil Rights Commission. Civil Rights Commission has given us the authority to investigate those cases, but we are looking to have that more clearly defined in the act by updating the act. And it's our interpretation as well is that sexual orientation, LGBTQ issues are covered in the Civil Rights Act, but we would like to see that more clearly defined And the purpose of that is to ensure that businesses, corporations, housing have a clear and a clear understanding of the act. So it's explicit. It's detailed in the act. There is some room for some interpretation that's being litigated now in Michigan courts. But again, we were very happy to see the commission take the firm approach that they took and given us the authority to investigate those cases.
So Mr. Hernandez, I want to jump in here for a minute as the equity officer. One of the many things that we discussed in our government relations team with Brad at the helm is legislation, and how legislation now and quite frankly in the future will affect Michiganders. So tell me, as far as Elliott Larson goes, do you see any needs for any changes, or how does it reflect society today, you know, as we start to get more inclusive of the word discrimination and its definition? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I like to think that when we reflect on our history and our culture, if we go back in time 100 years ago and we were to ask folks 100 years ago, are we all fully inclusive and embracing of diversity in our society? Perhaps the majority of folks saw themselves that way, even though we can agree that 100 years ago, our inclusive practices were not what they are today. And I'm not implying or stating that we have reached the mountaintop. But what I see is a progression in terms of our history. As we move in time, we have a tendency to see ourselves in the present as the most inclusive as we can be, as people doing good things with good intentions. If we were looking for the bad people somewhere, so that we could ask them, you know, why are you doing bad things? The fact is that we're going to struggle to find those folks because we all see ourselves as good people with good intentions. So just to think in terms of expansion and an approach that is more inclusive, there's tons of work that needs to be done, as the director was mentioning, even redefining the sex. What does it include? Who is being left out? And how can we continue to expand that definition so that everyone is included? I believe that there are many areas of our lives today when we think about socially constructed categories, protected classes, and the sectors of our society that continue to be discriminated against, that we will continue to discover how we're still leaving folks out. Folks and folks experience and with disabilities, folks from the LGBTQ community, the fields of inclusion and exclusion continue to evolve and continue to reveal to ourselves. So we're not done, and there's much more work to do. But I believe that we're moving in the right direction, and the Department of Civil Rights is looking for every possible way to honor the Elliott Larson Act, to pursue inclusion in the highest way possible, and to ensure that we are protecting the protected classes throughout the state.
So my assumption is the people who made the choice to join this call today, the employers who made the choice to join this call today, is the people who are trying their best, right, to avoid instances of discrimination in the workplace, and are trying their best to avoid interaction with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights on enforcement type actions, right? But we know that even those who try their best are going to have mix-ups in accidents in the workplace. So, we want to spend some time talking about what that looks like from an employer's perspective and how they can, work with you to resolve those problems and also avoid them. So, if an employee, for starters, is facing discrimination in the workplace, what should they do first from a Department of Civil Rights perspective?
I'll take that one, Alfredo. First and foremost, we really hope that employers look for ways to be inclusive, to have equitable practices, to review their policies, make sure that they create an all-inclusive and healthy work environment. That's first and foremost. We strongly recommend that employers educate themselves. Certainly right now, it's a really important time to take an all-inclusive approach, to have these courageous conversations with your employee base, to talk to them about some of the issues, some of the conversations, and what they're looking for. And don't be afraid to have those conversations. You know, I mean, you have to have these safe spaces where people can talk and challenge each other to think differently, particularly in these times. And then certainly after that has happened, if an employee feels that they have been discriminated against or marginalized, the Michigan Department of Civil Rights is here to take a complaint, investigate the complaint, look at the agency as a whole, look at the organization as a whole, come back with either the opportunity to have meaningful conversation in the form of settlement, and to be candid, sometimes something a bit more aggressive. I think there needs to be an accountability for these acts of discrimination and an intolerable environment for discriminatory practices. It has to be intolerable from the standpoint of it's not acceptable. It's not something that any of us can be okay with. And the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, we're here to help. We're here to guide. We're here to educate, partner with you as an organization if you want our help. But we're also here to support, change. I mean, that's what we want. We want to eradicate and eliminate discriminatory practices, and that's the key. So we can do that through education. We can do that through providing services from the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. We can come in and talk to your organization. We can certainly assist you in looking at model policy, things that have worked with other businesses similar to yours. There's a number of resources that we have at the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. But at the end of the day, we enforce the law, and that law is the Elliott Larson Act. And if there's a violation of that law, then we have remedies to resolve those violations. So, but we're here to help and we're here to support, I guess, to the point of your question, and we can provide you with tools and resources and give you opportunities to have those conversations that you may not feel comfortable having. We can come in and assist you with that. And Alfredo, if you want to add to that, please feel free to do so.
Sure. Thank you, Director. I think that some of the ways in which the Equity Office has been working with state agencies and across the state is looking for opportunities to provide or assist with prevention through education. So as the Director mentioned previously, discrimination will not be tolerated. This makes sense. At the same time, it is important that we understand and explore the root causes of discrimination. Where does it come from? How much does our history and culture play a role, perhaps, in the practices that often lead to discriminatory behavior? So the Equity Office offers a number of tools and strategies that can help organizations, employers understand not only civil rights law. We have a number of units and divisions that are able to train folks on civil rights law or ADA compliance or deaf, blind, and hard of hearing conversations, increasing access to folks with disability. But also from the Equity Office, we provide training on implicit bias. Our implicit bias training is also one of the leading resources available at the state level to help state agencies and organizations understand the root causes, as well as strategies to de-bias our workspaces and to create a more inclusive environment. A lot of the times, this is not a secret to any of us. When a discrimination complaint comes up, it's often a surprise to many folks. Well, we never meant to. What I meant to say was, I never intended to. So the training helps us understand how to minimize and how to mitigate unintended outcomes by recognizing where biases come from and the fact that we do need to unlearn some things that we never meant to learn in the first place. We do have a social responsibility to unlearn those. So the Department of Civil Rights has created a number of tools, racial equity toolkit that's available on our website, along with other templates. We have worked extensively with a number of national experts across the United States, as well as local experts, to develop an internal racial equity initiative and cultural competency initiative that is currently serving as a template across the state. So it's an extensive list of experts, from Peggy McIntosh to Joyce James Consulting in Texas, to Equity and Results with Erica Bernabe, who has worked extensively with the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, to Beth Semsky, who is an IDI, Intercultural Development Inventory qualified administrator. So we have taken this concept of learning and relearning history to increase our own cultural competency seriously, which has led us to lead the work across the state, because we do need to, in order to lead it, we need to model it. And part of that work requires that we recognize that we all have biases. And in order to engage in this process of debiasing ourselves, our interpersonal interactions, and our institutions, we need to move not just from, we need to not just acknowledge those biases, but then we need to explore what those are so that we're able to dismantle them and have the long-term impact that we all would like to see.
Yeah.
And I know, Bernard, it's not my turn to ask a question, but I've got a question from the audience that is very much related to this. Okay. So if I could just jump in for a minute. So, you know, I heard Alfredo and Director White also talk about the trainings that are available through the department. And I think, you know, from our employers, that's really great news. But one of the questions that was asked from the audience is there any sort of availability for, you know, certification, I guess, for an employer that they have completed a series of training. I guess what this person is looking for is some sort of, you know, state certification that, yes, I am an employer that has done the right things. And you know, not being the one who's asking the question, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but I guess I can envision a situation in which they can say, yes, this mistake happened, but I've done everything I could to try and avoid it in advance. We're working to rectify it, but I've done everything I could in advance. So is there any sort of certification process in advance that an employer can point to that we're doing everything we can to avoid these incidences going forward?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And Alfred, I'll let you jump in a moment to talk about what you're doing with equity. We are in the process of developing that very thing. Through our ADA group, we've been talking about developing some certifications, really maximizing what we've learned from being able to use this platform like we're doing today. You know, hopefully one day soon we'll be in a post-COVID world, but I think lessons learned and technology learned, we can use this in the near future and you know, to do things more efficiently than we ever have before. So we're talking about online training. We're talking about developing certifications that you are proficient in, you know, specifically certain things as it relates to equity, that your people are trained specifically to some of the components that we've developed at the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. And Alfredo's going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But we see opportunities to develop courses where people could just have conversations, you know, and certify the types of conversations through a class format. Here's something that's developing. Now, there are things that are coming out of the times that we're living in now, and some of the things that happened January 6th in this country, where there are just opinions and conversations that are being had. And we get calls, you know, how do I address an opinion? You know, how do I address in a workforce when someone has one of these divisive Facebook posts or other social media, not just picking on Facebook, but posts and, how do I develop policy around a person's freedom of speech? Well, if it's divisive and it's discriminatory, here you've got a problem in your organization. So to your question, yes, we have some, but we are working to develop more. And Alfredo, I'll let you take off and talk about your part.
Yeah, Director, I think you pretty much said it. We are working in expanding our ways of recognizing organizations and institutions that are embracing proactively the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion to increase that racial consciousness, to increase that cultural competency. Also recognizing that the work continues. Engaging or participating in a session, in a training session, it's a great, it's important work, but it doesn't end there, and it doesn't guarantee us anything. So what we need to recognize is that the work is ongoing, and that is why we have worked extensively on specific steps to operationalize equity within an organization. So of course that includes learning and unlearning, that includes increasing competency and more, but it also requires specific steps so that, for example, the organization is able to put together a core team of folks made up of members from all their organization at the highest level of leadership that is going to engage in continuous learning with a strategic plan in mind that makes DEI a priority. So the operationalizing piece is something that we have developed and that we work with many organizations across the state to help them understand what we do after this training. Because the fact is, and it's unfortunate, but the fact is that if we rely on what we learn and are able to unlearn in one training session, the unintended consequences and the unintended outcomes will continue to manifest themselves. And not to imply that sometimes the outcomes are intended, but for the most part, based on the field of research, we know that implicit bias and what is impacting our communities today is rooted in unintended outcomes.
Absolutely. And if I could just expound one more point that you were talking about, Alfredo. It starts at the top of an organization, right? So we can come in and we can bring all the training in the world, but the approach from the organization starts at the top. The fundamental ideas about inclusion and equity start at the top of the organization, and it has to be part of the fabric of the organization. So absolutely, we can come in and develop coursework and training programs, but when you have a discriminatory act that occurs in your organization, it has to be viewed as completely and utterly unacceptable. Oftentimes, people are more considerate of the response to the discriminatory act than they are to the discriminatory act itself. And when someone has been victimized by racist insensitivity, racial remarks, inequitable circumstances, the position of management and the organization has to set the tone for future violations immediately. You come out the gate with a direct and firm approach to any discriminatory act as unacceptable. It helps us as the Michigan Department of Civil Rights when we can come in and we can see that you have strong policy and you have an inclusive environment. And if there's an anomaly where this circumstance happened, then we can help you get to where you need to be as an organization, and we can help you correct the problem. But if the approach of the organization is to look the other way, is to make excuses, is to say, well, that's just so-and-so talking, and there's not strong policy to support and invite the proper conduct and oppose improper conduct, it creates a problem for the organization, and it makes these investigations very, very difficult. So while we are very interested in certifying organizations or assisting them in some type of standard, the standard starts with the organization and at the top of the organization with management. I hope that answered your question. I know we got quite long-winded on that one, but it's a great question.
No, thank you, Mr. Hernandez and Mr. White.